Welcome to my podcast, High Schools and Horrors, episode Why Puberty is as Frightening as the Gothic Novel. This is a spoiler alert, because the only thing scarier than Gothic horror is spoiling it. We open on Carrie, a shy, awkward teenage girl, clutching a towel protectively around her shoulders. The setting is the high school swimming pool. Carrie's more popular peers, pretty in an obvious sort of way, flounce around the deck. For the first few minutes of Kimberly Peirce's 2013 Carrie remake, the viewer is convinced this is a movie inspired by Mean Girls and The Duff. If I hadn't seen the original, I might have thought this movie was a Y2K revamp of an 80s rom-com, where the outcast girl rises to popularity among her totally tubular peers. However, it is quite the opposite, which will come as no surprise when you find out who wrote the story. And besides, what could be more frightening than a high school for any awkward teen? Carrie is one of my favorite movies, a horror drama that, upon reflection, is clearly inspired by the tropes and works of Gothic horror literature. This film is set in a small, extremely normal town in Maine, and most of the story unfolds in the local high school or in Carrie's townhouse, where she lives with her deeply religious mother. Right from the beginning of the movie, in about the fourth scene, it is revealed to the viewer that not only does Carrie not fit in amongst her peers and neighbors, but she is also telekinetic. This instance, where Carrie's fear and confusion about starting her period for the first time, with no understanding about how her body works, result in the exploding of a light bulb, which is the first example of a common Gothic horror trope. In Gothic horror literature, the setting of the story is often quite normal, seemingly unimportant. However, it is often this reality, the depiction of normal life, that is intertwined with the Gothic supernatural. It is this blending of the lines specifically that operate as a trope within Gothic horror and Gothic-inspired works. In the instance of Carrie, it is the blending of dull suburban life with the existence of telekinesis that right away demonstrates the Gothic inspiration of the film. In the beginning scenes, everything seems normal until the first supernatural phenomenon takes place, leaving the viewer feeling startled, betrayed, or in my case, excited. Meshing the real with the magical for an unexpected turn of events is something seen in almost every piece of Gothic literature we have studied in class. I also noticed that, while the overall setting of the story may not fall into the Gothic category, Carrie's house itself undoubtedly does. Similar to the classic example seen in The Castle of Otranto and The Fall of the House of Usher, Carrie's mother's house is undeniably gloomy. Strange shadows fall over the walls, it never seems to be bright enough, and there are numerous hidden stairways and closets, as we find out when Carrie is trapped in one. Carrie herself lives in the dingy, dark attic. The overall feeling of the house is eerie and off-putting, and makes me feel how I imagine the speaker in The Fall of the House of Usher felt as he approached the mansion. As the movie progresses, I noticed more and more elements of the supernatural being introduced. At first, Carrie only used her power unintentionally, but then she began to learn, to harness it, and to take advantage of it. However, running alongside this significant supernatural element is the normalcy of high school life continuing, with talk of the prom and Carrie's crush on a popular boy. While the suburban setting of Carrie is related to the Gothic trope of blending the real and supernatural, isolation still plays an integral role in this movie. While isolation is often used literally in Gothic works, resulting in remote castles, the type of which can be seen in Le Fanu's Carmilla, isolation is utilized in a more subtle manner in this film. Carrie incorporates this trope as the isolation of Carrie from her more, quote-unquote, normal peers. Carrie has no friends, has no idea how to interact with boys, and doesn't understand the unspoken social rules of teens. Social isolation is key in the film because as Carrie becomes more desperate to fit in, the more she is willing to use her telekinesis, specifically on her mother. It is this aspect of social isolation that leads me to connect the film Carrie with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Carrie does not begin as a monster, similar to Frankenstein's creation, but is, through experiences and interactions, driven to do unspeakable and evil things. In an article called From Frankenstein's Monster to Lester Ballard, the Evolving Gothic Monster, the concept of othering and how it aids in developing monsters in Gothic literature is examined. Simply put, othering is feeling isolated or completely alien to another, usually larger group. I'm sure many of us have felt other, especially in high school, and puberty can often make us feel alien even to ourselves. Not only can I draw the connection between Frankenstein's creature and Ballard, I can also see how othering and social isolation create a monster of Carrie. Carrie is a good girl who does bad things. She is outcast by her peers, and when she finally begins to feel like she is fitting in, she is humiliated and traumatized by a horrific prank in front of the whole school. This prolonged treatment as an outcast, as someone alien to those she should have been friends with, eventually causes Carrie to snap. Carrie then begins to exact revenge using her strange powers. This is similar to the experience of Frankenstein's creature, who is othered and treated as a monster until he actually becomes one. Both these Gothic narratives seem to say monsters are made and not born. Carrie, although she could be seen as an antagonist, elicits sympathy from anyone who has experienced marginalization or bullying. She continues to resonate with viewers generations later, as does Frankenstein's creature. And this makes us ask ourselves, of this film and many Gothic works, who the real hero of the story is. In the beginning third of the film, I can see inspiration being drawn from Modzelewski's work in the female uncanny Gothic novels for women. When Carrie's power first starts to reveal itself, she dismisses herself. Carrie finds excuses to explain away her power until she ultimately can't anymore. This aligns with Modzelewski's views that women of Gothic horror were not only seen as unreasonable or crazy by others, but often even by themselves. Another classic example of this can be seen in Carmilla, where the protagonist, Laura, shrugs off her eerie feelings about her companion as silly suppositions. Laura and Carrie both convince themselves, at least for a time, that their observations and feelings are nonsense. Carrie differs from Laura, however, in that she finally accepts the existence of her telekinesis and proceeds to utilize it. Finally, I feel the movie Carrie can be analyzed using Freud's The Uncanny. One of the major aspects of the film is the relationship between Carrie and her mother. For anyone who hasn't seen the film, while it is unclear exactly what illness is involved, Carrie's mother is abusive and intensely religious. Some movie buffs suggest it could be schizophrenia that causes her mother's obsession with religion and makes her view everything as sinful. Upon learning of Carrie's ability and power, her mother refers to her as a product of the devil. Freud's theory of the uncanny can be seen throughout the development of Carrie's relationship with her mother. His interpretation is that the uncanny and the frightening stem largely from an inability to understand something. This could be seen as one of the main reasons for Carrie's mother's reaction to her daughter's power. Similar to the phenomenon of death, no one can comprehend Carrie or her capabilities, which turn her into a vessel for the uncanny. Ultimately, Carrie is forced to kill her mother to save her own life, although, after the abuse she suffers at her mother's hands, many viewers might sympathize and even support this choice. Classical Gothic tropes to Frankenstein's creature, Laura, and even the uncanny, Pierce's Carrie is a goldmine of Gothic horror inspiration and connection. For any literary buffs, this film could be analyzed infinitely. But this is where I leave you. As said of Carrie in Eli Roth's series, The History of Horror, most horrible things are born of blood and trauma.